Now, I would like to open the floor for questions from anyone that is attending. So feel free to address your question to either of the speakers or in general. If other people have opinions, we're open to hear them.
I think, first of all, thank you very much for both of the talks. It's rather inspiring. I was wondering if I may ask Ashraf, do I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
So I've been already for quite some time also in a similar type of education and developing it in already approximately around 2000, 2005, we started developing this rather self-directed, open-ended. I don't know if you know Tim Ingold and Gert Bistra and quite a few people that are also seeing it way more as an open journey. The struggle that I'm having is that within the university that I'm working, so we had a whole open system without grades, very flexible. Students could write their own personal development plan, create their own portfolio. In the end, it changed a bit because we have an entire university that is moving forward, but we were a bit ahead of time for some things because people still would like to assess how someone individually is doing. I see that the consequences of that, where we had a very open system and got also a lot of feedback from companies and organizations hiring. By the way, I'm working in an industrial design department, not in an architecture department. But in the end, what I notice is that people are rather, I don't know how to say it, but they really try, even though the assessments were really well, but they feel uncomfortable unleashing so much power to students that they really have troubles with saying, look, it's all open, you do it, you find your form, you find the way of working together. And in that, also in the transdisciplinarity and in the multi-actor working together, we can see how you develop your competences. So in the end, looking at it, we see that at least in our institution, students have to do an individual project. They have to write and to comply to quite a number of rubrics and assessment criteria, etc. I think it's because, it's on the one hand trying to assure quality, but it's also leaning back a bit to the mechanisms of the old system. So I was really wondering how you see it in your environment, but also what you think is still needed in order to make the last step and not say, okay, we assess students individuals. They have to kind of have these check boxes because it's actually opposite of what you want them to learn. Mm-hmm. So I would be really curious to hear how we can go all the way and what your experience is there.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. And it's really a very important point. Let me start by the idea of the control of professional organizations, because that's a key thing in the freedom of education. So, for example, in the UK system, the entire education system is controlled by RIBA. So even you cannot change much in the curriculum without referring at some point in the process to the education section of RIBA and say, okay, this is what we want to do, and it's going to meet the learning outcomes and all of this. So this is a challenge in an education system controlled in a way, not fully controlled, but there is some form of control from the professional organization. So, and it limits really the freedom of education. Unfortunately, I'm talking about my experience. If I look at the American system, until probably 10 years ago, the American system was saying, okay, the whole purpose of education is about intellectualism. It's not about professionalism, which is two different models. And then when students graduate, they're going to go, someone else is going to test them in terms of their competencies related to practice. So was total freedom. Now it's being controlled by NAAB, NAB. Basically, it's becoming similar to the UK system. So I think it's a challenge, and I think it's really important to try to balance. It's like my experience in other contexts is basically whether we can look in Southeast Asia, for example, we can look in some schools, some progressive schools in the Middle East started to depart this idea of control and then balance the whole knowledge system. It's not giving students 100% freedom to develop their own curriculum, develop their own, and at the same time, it's not a total control of the school or of the professional organization. Of course, elective systems, for example, having optional classes, optional modules, can overcome some of these challenges. Just a quick example without trying to expand the response. But for example, a couple of years ago in a previous institution, we said, what about sustainable development goals? Where is sustainable development goals in our curriculum? So because there was an elective provision or a possibility for elective provision, we introduced a new class on architecture, urbanism, and sustainable development goals. And it's based on 15 experts. Each one deliver a focus on an area, one on water, one on health, one on infrastructure, whatever, circularity, life cycle costing, all of these aspects. And it ends up with students selected, awarded projects, and analyze them from the lens of one or two sustainable development goals. So there are possibilities really, but I understand the challenges, and of course we're not going to go into one of the two extremes, total control from the school and professional organization or total freedom. We really want to achieve or strike a balance between the two.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe a follow-up for Antonia would be, how do you evaluate the Circular City Challenge?
Actually, same. We're evaluating the impacts on the increase of the knowledge on sustainable development goals. But that's the criteria that's for impact measurement. And if I can just follow up on the previous discussion, this is my personal experience. So there's so much theory, so much discussion, theoretical discussion on how education should be. I have a son, he's 19 years old. He had exact same courses in primary and secondary school as I did.
Yeah.
That says it.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
And the way of examination and testing. And he was in a good school. So.
Yeah. Mika, you had a question?
Per Mikael, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. It's such a pleasure with this theorizing of architecture education. I'm personally just graduated doctor in KTH, but I'm now responsible for writing the policy for architectural education of the Swedish Association of Architects. So that is one of the reasons I wanted to join this discussion. So there are several things here, but I just had a straightforward question whether it's actually necessary to connect the issue of introducing a more social constructivist pedagogy with the issue of open curriculum or non-determined outcome. I think that we are now entering a new paradigm in knowledge, which But there is also a fundamental difference between this kind as architectural education and other kinds of scientific knowledge production, which is more determining how things are, but we are more concerned with how things could become. So it's this the whole kind of knowledge we have is of a transformative kind from the beginning. Even though we see this transfer of the agency from the individual to the community, and the need to do that because with sustainability, as you elegantly explained, we need to connect the social and ecological and create this circular economy. And that requires that we actually understand those processes in society and spend much more energy on that than on just projecting some fantasies about the good life. So I'm thinking that this field of inter and transdisciplinary knowledge is maturing now in a way that we could start to discuss also a more clearer agenda for this kind of curriculum. So so my question was about whether it's necessary to connect this condition of openness of curriculum with social constructivist pedagogy.
Ashraf, would you like to take this?
I don't know who would like to answer this question, but I think it was mainly maybe for Ashraf.
Okay, thank you very much. I think social constructivist pedagogy is not necessarily associated with the total freedom of the education model. It still can be introduced within a rigid professional model. And it all depends on two important things. What is the purpose of architecture education? I just want to give a very, very quick example. Last few years, we organized an international award for innovation in architecture pedagogy. And that award was basically trying to look at pedagogical practices and at the same time, sustainable planning design issues, how they are integrated together. And the award can be given to an individual or a school or a curriculum or a studio. It's very open and it's organized by the UIA. The interesting thing is that the jury discussions, who are very, very well established academics worldwide, including, for example, Tom Fisher from the US, Martha Thorne, who was the Pritzker Award coordinator. So very well established people. And then the view was that the role of the architect in the future is not going to be necessarily a designer. Can do millions of other things, not necessarily designing the mainstream building or environment that we used to see in previous architecture education. So I think the changing role of the architect and the acceptance of it will determine the shape of education and will give more freedom if we recognize that, of course, let's say the majority of the architects should have some sense of design and all of this, but not all of them should go into the design route. Many of them to work with communities, many of them to adopt certain practices that we have seen in models, for example, in rural America or in rural Europe. Samuel Mugby, who did the rural studio in America, and it was extremely successful for 20 years. And that departs the typical model. So I think we need to start by defining the role of architect and the role of architecture education. Which type of architect we need to graduate? Do we still want designers who were created as a result of the modern movement, or we want somebody else now? So it's open, of course, for discussion.
It's very interesting. Oh, Permika, you have a follow-up? Your hand was up again.
A replique, maybe. What you call it in English. Yes, because I see this is exactly the problem I'm facing when working on the professional policy, which is the practice. It's not the education I represent here. So we have this issue of how to, the identity of professional architects and how you define them. And so there is this, you have this very strong traditional role model, which actually is by many young people select to become architects. So you have, first of all, the issue of those who enter the education and what they aspire to, what they wish to do. And so you have to formulate this new role also in an persuasive way, both to attract students that are interested in this, and then also that we as an organization also promote these new opportunities, which we try to do in many ways for some years, but it is difficult for many reasons, as you can imagine, not the least because of the whole economy of the business and how the deliveries of architects are defined in society. So that is also an issue that needs to be addressed in these discussions. But I hope we will be able to contribute to that. Thank you.
Eva? Do I say that Eva? Or I'm not sure which one is your name.
Yeah, my name is Esther. I don't know what Zoom does to my name.
Hi, Esther.
But my last name is Van Zimmer, so that's it's Zoom that does that to my name. Yeah, I would like to link to what the previous speaker was saying, but from again a slightly different perspective. So I have a legal background, and I'm at the University of Antwerp, and we actually also have a research project ongoing here on the changing role of the architect. So exactly same word as Ashraf was just using. But then also how that can be reflected in law. Because in many countries, the legislation on the position of architects is quite old. So in Belgium, for instance, it's still from 1939. And it includes a very strong position, basically a monopoly for the architects in being involved in many parts of the design and construction process, but also significant liabilities and a lot of obligations in that respect that do not necessarily need to be with the architect, because the architect is not necessarily involved in all those different steps. And so I also think that apart from the education, which is super important, also there should be definitely an update in many countries on the legal perspective of that and the reflection of that. And so we're working on that with a PhD project in the field. So I thought let's add another perspective on this regard. And I really find the work very interesting that was presented, and I will definitely also ask my PhD researcher to include some of the works on the transformative pedagogy, because I think it fits well, and I think also within the legal context, it's important to think how that can be reflected in the education. So there's there should be an integrated approach. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther. Maybe to kind of try to connect the two presentations. What I think that many of the projects of this call are striving towards is on the one hand, connecting being transdisciplinary, connecting different disciplines, but also different actors within society, but also given the fact that, especially, for example, in the CoNECT project, we are predominantly from an urban architectural place. Disciplinarily, we are coming from there. We see also that it really is about that being involved even in this kind of project requires a different kind of architect, a different kind of urban scholar, a different kind of professional even. But a lot of the times when I also teach, when I teach, and I've started teaching year 1, so 18-year-olds this year, for the first time. While there's plenty of enthusiasm, I also see plenty of apathy and plenty of not necessarily, a feeling of fear, plenty of fear among students with regard to the future, with regard to thinking about circularity and sustainability as goals that we need to work towards, and for which the teacher does not actually have an absolute answer to. So I was wondering, both Ashraf and Antonia, if you, in your experience with the Circular City Challenge or with architectural education more broadly, can reflect a little bit on the kind of attitudes of students that you encounter.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when we were doing interviews with students and teachers, there's strong climate anxiety among them. And I believe that the root of all fear is lack of understanding of the issue, right? When you don't have deeper understanding, it's very easy to live in fear and to be manipulated into all kinds of fears, right? Therefore, this curricula that we're testing right now, it's all about asking questions, going around in their community, going with open minds to stakeholders, to people, and ask them about themselves. What's their take on the perceived issue, right? Maybe they'll come to the conclusion it's just perceived issue. This is the best we can do. Yes, so we're trying to nurture open minds who just wants and curiosity to understand the issue. And I think that's the medicine for fear.
Ashraf, do you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I have just a general comment related to your point. Actually, I wouldn't, of course, students we are doing all of this for students, but at the same time, I would say the challenge is the system, is the actual university system, which is developed to serve its own interest, not developed to serve the student or learning. If you look at it, everything is fragmented into courses, marks, holidays, lectures, hours, all of these aspects. And these are basically to control the process, you know what I mean? But not necessarily to encourage learning or support learning. One interesting thing is that our university here now, for example, is taking experiential learning as a strategic university objective, which is really, really very good. So, and everybody in the entire university talks about experiential learning and authentic learning, okay? How learning is basically associated with industry, with society, with context, with region, all of this. So in terms of attitude, student attitudes, I think it has to do with of course, what you teach them in the first year. Because the first year is a critical year. You develop all kinds of negative attitudes or positive attitudes in the first year. We have a perception that we introduce the big issues, the social issues, when they are grown up, when they are in year 4 or year 5. But that's too late. After we developed all the bad habits and all the bad attitudes in the beginning years, we ask them, oh no, now you need to work with society. It's too late, you know what I mean? It's too late. We need to embed this from year 1. You know, as we develop skills in terms of creativity, in terms of graphics, all of that, we need to develop social skills, listening, asking the right questions, interrogating the brief. Okay, if we're designing something, why we're designing it, all of these aspects. So I think we need to develop good attitudes from the early years. So
Couldn't agree more. Any other questions from the floor? Lawrence.
Yeah, I think I really agree with what Ashraf was saying there, and I think it also touched on what the circular city presentation. I think to link a different way of educating architects to a different form of practicing architecture, because also if we think about the circular city or circular economy, we can't keep producing new buildings, but the architectural education, most architectural education sort of starts from the premise that we're going to design buildings. So then, firstly, that's obviously inherently unsustainable, but I think students are also sort of taught implicitly that the skills you have are to design buildings. So whatever problems we face, we're going to design a building at it to try and solve the problem. And obviously, increasingly, we're facing problems that you can't solve by building buildings. So both practically, but also as a solution, spatially, it won't be about building buildings anymore. It will be about organizing. It will be about renovating. It will be about coming up with alternative practices and organizations. But like Ashraf was saying, by the time you get to fourth year, where you're trying to address these issues, you already have this grounding of we're going to build buildings. And yeah, I really think that flipping that around, teaching them to engage with the social and the urban and the spatial issues, and then, if necessary, designing buildings at the end of that process would be a much more useful way of going about it. But again, I think what Caroline and Esther were also talking about, the way that work is assessed, the way that relates to the orders of architects and institutes of architects that sort of have this profession that they want to assess your education in terms of how well you're preparing a student for the profession, is at odds with a sort of transformative agenda of transforming the profession. So I'm not sure sort of, which one should come first there, if the university can actually drive the profession to change, because increasingly universities are so tied to sort of industry and professions that the university follows the industry rather than the other way around. I don't know if you have some thoughts on that, but I don't know, to me that seems like a big part of the problem or the challenge.
Can we speak about transformative learning outside of education? From the people that are here that are working in other settings through NGOs or through other types of organizations. We've spoken quite a lot about education in the context of schools or in the context of a university. Are there any other kind of thoughts of where we can pursue transformative learning in this small group? I think we've remained very small in the last 5 minutes. Emilio.
Thank you for the very inspiring presentations and very important discussion. Some of you know about also the work that I've been involved in these topics of education and transformative education. But on the question that you just lifted, I can think of something that can be interesting to look at is some sort of an educational module or a program for professionals that this organization called Architecture Sans Frontières International, as a ASF International, through its 6 different partners. It's an umbrella organization that about 10-12 years ago created this program called Challenging Practice. And the Swedish organization for ASF, which is called Architecture Utan Gränser, also is involved in that. So it creates, it's 3 different modules, and it is a module that is based on a collection of literature and topics. And then there is a module that is a 2 days kind of simulation of a case that is a real case, and then practicing within that case, those 2 cases actually. And then there is the 3rd step, which is, or phase, which is a kind of in the field type of work for a few weeks in a certain context in the world. And the 3rd step, or the last step, then it's some sort of a report that participants can fill in of reflective report or from a practice of some sort. And this is an accredited RIBA education, which is also the interesting aspect of it, which most practitioners don't know about, and don't even think of something that kind of completes your education as a practitioner, to be able to work with this kind of multiple roles and multiple tasks that we are required as professionals. So it's my tips to all of you here is this challenging practice is an example of something that is for outside of architecture education.
Mikael, your hand was up.
Yes, I could add that I've been working with the CPD program for Architects Sweden for 20 years, and now I'm back, but now I have a very special task to organize a CPD program for urban planners in Ukraine. So we start in May with 12 teams that will come to Stockholm, and then we will come back to discuss exactly this kind of ideas about circular economy and participatory planning and how to implement that in those projects in Ukraine. And we also applied for an additional funding for this educational program, which is this kind of lifelong learning approach. So these are practitioners who in the field that have been working, I think, on average 10 to 20 years. So of course, it's also important to consider that practitioners has this interest in transforming their practice. But it is a challenge here, and it's very interesting challenge to meet those deterministic ideas about knowledge that dominates the practice in Ukraine and as in many places. And that is also this, what you call it, Vikutama tradition of the Russian, the Moscow school, they call it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I'm now trying to grasp with and understand better. So that was also very good that you gave me this clue.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to tell you about that. We made an application to work with Sharing Cities, who developed this participatory model together with UN Habitat. So we hope that we will even enhance this capacity in the coming year. So we will have this dedicated workshop about participatory planning for rebuilding of Ukraine next spring, probably, hopefully in Vilnius. So if you're interested to be part of that in some sense, you're welcome to contact me.
Excellent.
I think Daniela is doing something along the lines as well, so she might get in touch with you, but now she has a question or a comment. And I think this might be the last question / comment that we have time for. Daniela, go ahead.
Well, yeah, we're actually working in the same project led by with Ukraine, and we're gonna see each other in Stockholm shortly. But before that, we are actually going in April to Ukraine, planning for a summer camp in August. And actually, I don't have a specific question. I have a lot of reflections, and one of them, maybe we can start from this instance of educational forum or learning through experience or whatever, like the summer camp, and just going a little bit in my personal history, that in the early 2000s, when I was a student, there were very few summer universities, and now there are tens of summer schools across Romania, doing all sorts of participatory actions related to architecture, restoration, renovation, or just small interventions. And I think that it goes to show the need of our students to apply and to have live learning experiences. Actually, this summer camp that I'm referring to in Ukraine shows also the need of people who are in distress to go and focus on issues like heritage and concerns that go a little over the daily life, the conditions of daily life, and get involved in something bigger than what is going on in their day-to-day existence. And then I was also reflecting on our Urboteca Fellowship, the one that you mentioned in your introduction, which is a program that we develop as an NGO, and we bring usually at least three universities together. And it we always say that we're going to work with a small group, and this year we wanted to work with a small group of people, like 15, and we ended up working with 40 fellows, just because they are second or third year students, all the way to almost senior professionals, I would say, in their 40s, mid 40s. And it's they all share this need of questioning our existing practices, the conventional ways of doing things, and also questioning their own career for the mid-career level or more senior participants, questioning their own way of doing things, and how that can be seen or reflected upon from the other side. So also building empathy across disciplines and across the various actors. And I think that all these this constellation of small experiences that I'm now thinking of, they all are consistent also with this not knowing exactly if the education is driving the profession or the profession is driving the education, but it's also all sort of growing from a middle and having impact both in the education and in the profession, and in how we are organizing our thought, our knowledge, and also our way of doing things.
Yeah, on that optimistic note, thank you everyone so much for hanging on until 5:30 Central European, 4:30 in the UK. And I hope that you will join us again in June. I will keep on advertising these events, and yeah, let's keep up the nice discussions. Thank you so much for today.
Okay,
Thank you.
Ashraf and Antonia for the great presentations.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
Okay, thank you.